Alright, what's up everyone? Welcome back to the channel. I'm Tokenicer and I'm here to bring you guys in-depth analysis, news, and insights from the digital asset space, along with covering the progressive tokenization of the world. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe and turn that ringer on, along with checking out the Spotify, Medium, Twitter, and Instagram for more crypto analysis content just like this. And that's all at Tokenicer. Or you can just head on over to tokenicer.network for all my content platforms in one place. And as always, that'll be linked right down in the description below. So in today's episode, we had a very special guest come on, and he spent the past few years of his work dedicated to ISO standard TC307. Yes, this is the same standard that Gilbert Verdian founded back in his time working in Australia. So he not only works as the convener to the smart contract and application working group within TC307, but he's doing a ton of other work that all kind of relates back to kind of quant and standardization somehow. Whether it be his work with other standard setting bodies in the adoption of TC307, especially in Spain, to even some work around LACChain and INATBA. I had a great time picking Ismael's brain and further learning about the procedure of standardization, and overall just discussing with someone who directly worked in the industry. And just before we start, I just got to remind everyone real quick that neither me nor my guests are any form of financial or investment advisors. So don't be taking anything you see or hear from us as any form of financial advice. But now that we got that out of the way, let's get right into it. Alright, what's up everyone? Welcome back to the channel. It's Tokenicer and I'm here with a very special guest today. So today we've got Ismael Arribas, and he's been doing a ton of work over the past few years around ISO standards, specifically ISO TC307, and a bunch of other standard setting bodies such as the ITU and the European Standardization Group. So Ismael, do you want to just introduce yourself to everyone and kind of talk about who you are?
Yes, hello. This is a collective entrepreneur. This is it. But I am very proud running since 2006 a techno-legal compliance with my sister. And yes, as you said, I jumped into the standardization in 2016, where the TC307 launched the call to the mirror committees, and I joined to the national committee. To be honest, for all the audience, I had no idea what was a standard, the jure in this case. I was working in other open source communities and standards de facto and so on, but that was my involvement. Nowadays, we are happily involved in different projects. We own different companies. All of them are very well in the telecommunication and ICT sector, indeed. And well, I am yours for any question and dialogue in Tokenicer. It's my pleasure to be with you.
Awesome, man. So just to get started, do you want to kind of tell us about what it was about the ISO standard TC307 that really caught your eye and has you kind of doing all this work for them now?
Yes, well, at the very beginning, at the inception, it was a group that was organized in different working groups. Indeed, the TC307 is evolving. It's a dynamic group with different topics. Really, at the very beginning, we were just divided in working group 1, 2, 3, and 4 and 5. Then appeared the 6 and 7. Then appeared joint working groups. Then appeared the liaisons. Then the ad hoc group. Well, I just mentioned this to highlight the complexity of the diversity in the ISO standards to get quality standardization projects. At the beginning, I really entered into all the groups because I wanted to understand the dynamics and how to contribute, because my profile is not coming, although I was working and coming in my background in Citigroup for 7 years in the compliance division. I don't represent a big company. I am just involved with open source projects, and I am helping altruistically with one project that I was awarded in ITUT, and I entered then into the governance working group, and nowadays I am the convener for the smart contracts and their applications. I'm humbly proud that the delegates get the confidence on my convenership, and really I am very well motivated and extremely focused on that area and helping my colleague in the interoperability section. I think that resumes a little bit, but if you want to go in deeply in some of the topics, I could say the first group is terminology, vocabulary. The second is security, privacy, and identity, which is a joint working group also with the technical committee of security and privacy and identity for blockchain DLTs, called like that, with the subcommittee 27. Then the smart contracts, which is the working group 3. The governance, which is the working group 5. Fresh publication, very good technical specification. I recommend the audience to have a look at it. And the working group 6 is about use cases, and the working group 7 is in regards to interoperability. There are other ad hoc groups, for instance, for physical assets as non-fungible tokens and so on. Sorry, Tokenicer, you need to stop me, because since 2016 it was very productive, although 8 published standards in ISO TC307. Really, there are projects that gave, or studies even, and some reports that are giving help to the industry and adoption.
Yeah, for sure. And you being the convener of the smart contracts and application side of ISO TC307, how has that been for you, and how has that been kind of working alongside that working group? And have you been collaborating with other ones, such as the ones with maybe digital currencies, interoperability, or maybe governance?
Yeah. Well, I just entered into force for the next 2 years, and I am really novel as convener, but I am receiving a lot of support from the Australian Secretariat, which is the Secretariat of TC307, and also the delegates are motivated to explore, and all of them convey that the smart contracts is a topic that is necessary to be in the TC307. However, I detected that it was no easy how to go for projects in smart contracts, because in different projects appear this automated process and some chapters of smart contracts. So we started for a preliminary work item, which we are exploring different ways to categorize the smart contracts or to classify smart contracts. And if we progress and we could identify different classification of smart contracts, could help also to intricate in these transversal ways that you mentioned. For instance, these smart contracts are running in this one classification that personally I'm exploring, and I am not discovering nothing. Is based on the programming language. Very simple, because the standard needs to be neutral. So based on the programming language, we can identify which blockchain, and we can identify which DLT in terms of permission, if it is the case, could occur. So could help the industry and the adoption to identify vulnerabilities or some sequential dependencies that you need to take in consideration in the security assessment or something like that. So in the group, we are helping other groups, but exploring a potential classification of smart contracts, or in other words, different ways to classify smart contracts.
Yeah, for sure. I'd imagine there's a bit of overlap between the two parties. So one thing I'm really interested about is the interoperability of these smart contracts, and whether you've had much work regarding that working group. So working group 7.
Yes, in the working group 7 in ISO, our colleague from the United Kingdom, Gilbert Berdian, is the convener, and he's doing a great work. I am contributing continuously to the drafting sessions, and the document is evolving, but is not published. I was recently very honored to be in ETSI, which is the European Standard Telecommunications Institute, and there is a new publication a few weeks ago. I can share it in the chat for anyone.
Right. This was this was the one on interoperability with permission blockchains, right?
Yes, it is indeed the interlayer interoperability. And really the approach is very good and is very well received to harmonize strategic ledgers of other policies for interoperability frameworks, where you can go for a legal ledger, a semantic layer, a syntactic layer, even though, or even a governance layer. And that is a kind of strategy. And in the exploration I did during the last 3 years, what about if we approach interoperability in terms of unidirectional or bidirectional? It's easier to manage and identify potential gaps, challenges, risk, and even solutions if we approach in that way, not only for oracles, even though for direct or indirect mechanism. So really, I have my own exploration indeed. I am under duties, and I cannot say too much because I am committed with the evolution of the drafting with the Working Group 7.
No worries. All right, but just switching the script a little from ISO TC307, I'm very curious how the adoption of that standard has been alongside some other standards. So a standard that's been kind of discussed a lot is also ISO 20022, so the new financial messaging standard. And I'm just curious if there's any overlap in work between TC307 and 20022.
No, indeed it is mentioned. Is one of the adopted standards for interoperability. If you go to the VASP or CASP, I mean the crypto asset service provider or the virtual asset service provider, that standard is very well recognized, and even in the different documents published by ISO is well mentioned. This is the good thing between ISO. When something is overlapping, there is a fair weight in the experts that launch the need of liaison with this or this other group. And the efforts of the liaison, I think, is really on the shadow for ISO, and really needs to be more efficient support for them. I am one of the cases. Sometimes we are losing, and as you well said, we can mitigate overlapping chapters and this kind of circumstances. In the case you mentioned, in the 222, is consolidated and harmonized in TC307.
Awesome. Okay, that's amazing to hear. Thank you for that. And you know, while you're speaking on license, I think a good thing to bring up is your work at INATBA and you being co-chair of standardization there, in addition to a license for TC307, of course. So how has that been, working with so many fintech companies, crypto startups, and other standard-setting bodies around the world?
Well, the good thing is that when I was watching in regards of INATBA, was at the very beginning. So nowadays, Kumfood, which is our holding company, and this techno-legal firm, really is co-founder, although the idea of INATBA is not setting standards, is to bring the organizations that are setting standards to converge and harmonize and avoid these overlapping actions, and help the understanding and the adoption with the regulators to save barriers. That was very attractive for on the very beginning. And nowadays, the co-chair with myself is also Gilbert, the convener of the Working Group 7. So both of us are motivated to harmonize globally and universally. And really, we have this chance and this opportunity and this respect from the supporters in the organization that voted for us, and that makes INATBA a good player globally, as you said, not only for the policymakers, for the crypto space, for the startups, the small and medium enterprises. For the moment, it's not accepted individuals or freelance, but INATBA is really hands-on. And in the standardization committee, tomorrow we will have the regular meeting, the monthly regular meeting, and really we are highlighting circumstances to prepare the next joining forces for standardization in December, which really is the third event that were impacted globally in different industries and governments as well. So the idea is to help this community and this association to move on in their helping.
For sure, yeah, it's all about moving forwards, and the idea that INATBA is made of so many different compartments of the global economy. I think it is a really powerful organization to help push forward kind of the adoption of blockchain overall, right?
Yes, and they respect, because as I said, we are micro enterprise category, although we are 16 years old and very well respected and positioned, but we are micro enterprise, and we have feeling equilibrium in terms of power decision making, and management as well. And anyone is welcome to raise their voice, even contradictions. Well, it's really what you said, multidisciplinary, organic environment, as well as the diversity between the members and actors. You're right.
Yeah, definitely. And with you being co-chair of standardization alongside Gilbert Verdian, I think when we're talking about ISO TC307, we have to mention him, right? So I just kind of want to know how kind of your relationship has been with Gilbert, with working with him and kind of everything else around that.
Yeah, well, he is currently the liaison officer between INATBA and ISO TC307. Both of us met in London at the first plenary, at the second plenary of ISO TC307, where everything was really to move on with a technical committee, not just a plenary to decide if this committee makes sense. And since that moment, we were closely working in different projects, as well as in the industry. We met also in the LACChain Alliance, for instance, working with our companies and our projects in LACChain Alliance. In the standardization side, as we are in the practice as well, we have this, let's say, flexibility or modularity to adopt in a combination way, and we don't overlap. Really, it's a pleasure work with him and his experience and his great team as well in the Quant Network. I'm very happy to contribute when Gilbert is there, because he's a listener and is really a key voice in the market.
For sure, yeah. I think he's done a lot of things regarding not just crypto, but blockchain and DLT overall, that I think is going to be really important for the forward adoption of this technology.
Absolutely.
And just, speaking on Quant Network, I'm curious to see kind of how your thoughts on how they're solving interoperability is with, Gilbert, that being Gilbert Verdian's company, and just overall the solution of Overledger.
Well, I just can talk aside, but I can definitely say that we are exploring as one of the key architectures to allocate one of our projects, and really makes sense since the beginning, because this team understood very quickly the ideology of relationships based on interoperability, whatever could be machine, human to human, human to machine to machine, or multi-environment, multi-scenarios. And really we were on the same pages working time ago. And the approach to interoperability over them is to distress the capacity to take care of every single circumstances of coding by basics of accountability from a company, to be honest. And this is the way they are working, and it's very valuable. Then there is their crypto over there, which is amazing how it's evolving as well. But that is another story, right?
For sure, yeah. There's the enterprise side of DLT, and then there's kind of this whole everything happening in crypto right now, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, government, in essential, is an enterprise.
That's a very good point, yes. While we're talking about intergovernmental organizations, I just want to touch up a little more on the ITU's collaboration with ISO on this standard. Is this something we commonly see with standard setting bodies working together, such as ITU and ISO working on TC307?
Definitely, they pay attention between others constantly and mention in their documents. They don't want to enter in conflict or of projects or so on, and it's rare that when a conflict appears, they don't find the action to resolve it or reviewing or so on in ITUT. The difference is that in ISO there are other interests by the national bodies, and the representation is based on not membership, is based on the relationship with the national standardization body of each country, right? ITUT, my colleagues from ISO will kill me, but it's my favorite because allow me to grow personally in terms of big relationships that I really felt very knowledgeable in that moment for my entrepreneurship. And I was twice awarded by ITU, and really one of them was in 2016 for a project. It's a decentralized altruistic community we are building since 2016, and really makes me like an extra point. But it's also the way of work over there. The way of work over there is not so static like ISO. So allow the intervention and the participation a little bit more trustless or confidence-less. I don't know how to use this word in English, but I mean, you don't need to be be shameless.
Okay.
You understand? Sorry, my English in that.
Yeah, no worries. I think I understand where you're trying to get at, for sure.
Yeah, and ITUT allowed that participatory. I met there with different entrepreneurs and collective entrepreneurs, not only an individual professors and PhD or whatever, not just the telco industry or the big companies or impact companies or so on. So that how is it working? But ITUT gives recommendations, and the adoption of the recommendations is also based on assemblies, voting process or so on, but doesn't represent one per country, you know?
I see. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yes. So it's different the way the recommendations are adopted in ITUT rather than in ISO TC307 rules.
Yeah, ISO is a lot more like if ISO standardizes them, all the member countries also has to standardize them, right?
Yes, and probably your country has got a specific law that tackle that standard, and other country is free law for that. Let's say privacy, GDPR we have in Spain. In Canada, you have the PIPA, but there are countries without privacy law, you know?
Yeah, no, for sure. And privacy is a really big controversial concern, right?
Wow, it is.
For sure, yeah. And you know, how has the privacy part of ISO TC307 been in terms of development for that?
Oh, you are touching.
Is that a sensitive topic?
Yes, yes. Nowadays, there are two documents, which is in this joint working group 4 I mentioned before, that jointly security, identity, privacy together. And there is two projects particularly working as well, because the topic is relevant. One of them is on regards of trust anchors that you can imagine, and the other is decentralized identity, which personally I would say that identity cannot be decentralized. Probably the way you identify, so identification or authentication, something like that, but that is another discussion. Or the management of your identity could be decentralized, but not your identity.
Definitely, yeah.
Something like that. Well, but there are two documents over there very important that are affected for the privacy. And there is one specification from the German national body that was mentioned very many times. I don't remember the number right now, but if you write on Google DIN, DIN, privacy by design, blockchain privacy by design. Let me check and I can share it, because it is very European focused, by the way.
Yeah.
Because it's going for the article of forgiveness and so on, you know.
And this is privacy for blockchains in Germany, you said?
Yeah, well, yes, the specification is 4997. Privacy.
Yeah, I just found it too.
Yes, that one. This is specification run over the GDPR. That's all. Just Europe GDPR, but help, because GDPR inspired other regulation already and were inspired by other. So really helps. And I like the word that my colleagues from Germany don't.
For sure, that's definitely interesting, seeing you know, this is a standard that's specific to Germany, right?
Indeed, but
Okay.
it's applicable for the view of the European member states, because they need to respect the GDPR principles and all of this. And I think it helped different jurisdictions in Europe, not only German, but it's applicable just in German. Yes, you are absolutely right.
For sure. Okay. And you know, speaking a little on maybe a little less ISO, so we don't have to be touching as many sensitive topics. I wanted to briefly touch up on LACChain a bit. I've seen some of your activity around LACChain's development, and I'm just really curious to see how has development been there? How much standardization has been talked about within that respective consortium?
Yes, I'm very happy that they selected me to be the principal advisor for the Inter-American Development Bank laboratory for this particular project of LACChain. And since the very beginning, I was helping with the standardization desk. And in terms of development, really is a multi-chain with a multi-purpose, but has got a very good governance with center like 3 areas. Okay, one area is we need to respect different jurisdictions, because we are starting in the region of Latin and Caribbean countries, but they are globally focused right now in trans-American services and products. So with the Pan-American European blockchain services infrastructure, there are much, but with other, right? And in terms of deployment, there are 2 main nets working, let's say main nets, which is not appropriate by my side, but two networks running in LACChain right now. Both of them are public permissioned, and really the permission is very easy to run your node. You have 2 capacities to run nodes. You want just to be an observer, even though, or writer, let's say. And then there are others that can validate. And in that validation process, they are insisting a lot in quantum resistance. And they produce, well, we produce, allow me to be there because I have one node with one of our companies in LACChain. And really, we produce a decentralized model, which is in-chain, smart contracts that automatically change the validators and provide a protocol of gas. So it's a protective mechanism in terms of someone wants to launch multi-billion transactions with no gas limit to the network and could collapse or even broke it. So they take care about that governance side of the infrastructure, and then they go also with their own chain principles based on the LACChain ID, which is an identity solution to work with decentralized credentials and management of all of these verifiable credentials and circumstances in the on-chain to make business, product, and services. And the whole of the team works in a fluent talk with the three levels, with the social layer, their allies, with the administrative or organizational level, all the team force, the human resources, the human power that help to the maintenance, to the assistance at different levels in the network, but also with the social layer, with the allies, and so on. And also the business spectrum in terms of the algorithmic governance. How to manage this? By an orchestration entity, which is underlying all the responsibilities in common law and traditional law, providing accountability and that respect. So maintain the neutrality of the network by protecting this conflict that could occur, right? But it's tremendous, the work that is advancing there, and for me is future and present. It was past just a few years ago.
You know, when you're building out something the scale of LACChain is, you've really got to focus on things like governance, security, and just resilience, right? Because when you're having 13 plus countries all connecting together,
exactly,
network shut down, right? There's a lot of retail crypto networks that are kind of showing signs of not scaling to that size. But when you're building something out like LACChain, you really need that level of security, right? And trust.
You are right. You are right. And all of the country, government, policy entities, public entities are committed to push up the scaling. So it's, as you said, all in conjunction make the completeness of the community in this case. And that's why it's unique, because there are different countries which are really under acquittance, you know?
For sure, yeah. Okay, so yeah, we've talked on LACChain, we've talked on INATBA, ITU. I'm really curious to see curious to hear about, I guess, what you're most excited about for the development of the standard TC307 and overall the adoption of blockchain and distributed ledgers in, say, 5 years.
To help the projects of the open source community, because sometimes we are brutally anarchist and don't look to something that is impacting regulatory affairs, and we are going to go there. We are disrupting that area. This is my main commitment, and that's why I entered into the standardization, where I had no idea how to help the entrepreneurs, the small and medium enterprises, and even the big ones that for a decision in their administrative or corporate level decide to make an influence of a standard because they spend a lot of money, and that standards are not really neutral and doesn't progress. There are a lot of aggressive points within the power of the globe, and I think that the endowment is coming from an open society where these projects are not inspiring to me to make other projects, are a reality to make more employment, more digital economy, more knowledge, and more peace, in other words. So that is my main commitment. Sorry, Tokenicer, but you touch a very nuclear commitment inside me.
I love what you said there, and it speaks a lot about you, saying that you came into the world of standardization to help create a more transparent, open, and just borderless, peaceful world. I think that's a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I just talk with heart mining.
I think that's the best way to talk. Speak right from your heart, right?
Sure.
Yeah, and just one more question before we wrap it up with a quick rapid fire round. So if you've been, I'm guessing you've been aware of the standard Quant has been working with MIT on with the IETF. So it was previously called ODAP and now transferred to SAT. I'm just curious if how much you've heard about that and whether there's any overlap within either INATBA or ISO or the ITUT.
You caught me there. I have no response there because I don't have this information at all. I know some members of MIT and ETF as well, as you mentioned, but not in particular with the Quant. INATBA invited members of MIT many times in different webinars, but not MIT in particular, any other academic resources, but in that question you got me. Sorry.
No worries. Okay, so just before you have to go, I've just got 5 really quick questions for you that aren't really DLT related or anything, but they might be kind of fun. So first off, what's your favorite food?
Well, baby lamb.
Baby lamb, okay. If you could look into the future, let's say 10, 20 years in the future, do you think you'd do it? Or would you want to live it out yourself with, save the surprises?
I am committed in a mission. I announced this mission in ITUT in 2019, committed with the Sustainable Development Goal 16 as a defensor of technological peace. And I will pass away fighting for it. I know for sure.
That's beautiful. All right. Next up, where's one place in the world you'd want to travel to before you go?
One Iceland.
Iceland, okay.
Pascua, the island of Pascua.
I've never heard of Pascua, no. I've heard of Iceland, though.
No, Iceland, I would love, but I know I would try to go very soon because it's pending duties there. You more transcendental question, and and that island particularly has got personal things with my father, and I want to see why in one day or other.
Awesome. Okay. All right, and just final question. What has been, let's say, one of the happiest moments in your life?
With my goddaughters. I have 2 goddaughters. One of them is 35, 36 this year, a couple of months ago, and she made me happy, pushing me a lot, a different level of thoughts. But also I was a fresh baby 2 years ago with my sister, as my second goddaughter, and the way she managed the human relationships makes me happy a lot. With 2 years, it's crazy. Control it by crying or by whatever, but this manipulation at its bits.
That's amazing, man. It seems like, you're very focused on technical standardizations and everything, but at heart, you still love that human-to-human connection, right?
Yeah, I am Tauro. I am Taurus. I need this, and I'm from Spain. Passion. This, my blood is running. I can feel it. So I need this as a fundamental in my life.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, Ismael, thank you so much for coming on. I've learned a ton from what you've had to share with us, and I'm sure the rest of the community will share very similar thoughts. And just before we close, if anyone wants to reach out to you, where could they reach out to you?
Well, they can go to kumfood.com. In LinkedIn, you can write Ismael Arribas, and I always respond and connect. And it's easy to find out over there with the principles of respecting the open source community. You know how it works. So I am there, and by Kumfood, you can find all the reference to me.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much again, Ismael. I hope you have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you, Tokenicer. Really enjoy, really learn, and you push me inside. That really, it's amazing, awesome, Tokenicer. Thank you
For
so
sure.
much.
I'd love to have you on again.
Super. Cheers to the community. Bye.
Bye. All right, so there you guys have it. This has been one of the coolest opportunities I've had in getting to learn directly from a member within so many huge players in DLT. From ISO to ITU, LACChain, INATBA, and so much more. So I just wanted to give one quick final shout out to Ismael for agreeing to come on and bringing more overall knowledge and clarity to the community. I had a great time talking with him, and hopefully everyone managed to get a little something out of it, whatever it may be. But that's about all we've got for today. Remember, if you enjoyed the content, a like and subscribe means the world for supporting the channel. And don't forget to check out Tokenicer.network if you'd like more content just like this. But until next time guys, as usual, stay safe and keep grinding. Peace.